welcome to the Lionheart Institute podcast. My name is Richard Thomas, and
I'm Tiffany Thomas.
we want to welcome you to a very special interview series with Walt B. Sweet B, the baller of all ballers, one of the greatest athletes to ever come out of the state of Washington and in the state out of Oregon. Really dominated play here in our state, both at a national championship level and at a high school level. And I'm so excited to help share his story because, as you will discover, he is a difference maker. The thing that's made Walt B so sweet over the years is not just his athletic ability, but the difference that he makes in other people's lives. Even when his life was at its greatest depth, he has still climbed out of the bottom of what I would really say and found himself at the top making a difference in people's lives. It's going to really change the game, both at the athletic level and at the individual level. He is one of my heroes, always has been. Every once in a while, I'll still turn on YouTube, my favorite place to watch old highlights. And I will go to 4 minutes and 20 seconds in the Arizona versus UW game. And I will see the sweetest pick that you can ever see. A stadium go crazy, all because of this individual's energy. He used to come out, had the sweetest little thing he would do. He would come out from kickoff, and he would do the dance from the middle of the field all the way to the sideline. And I can't tell you how many times I threw my back out. I was standing on top of a desk one time, not the table, messed around and slipped and fell out. I almost couldn't play. I was so jacked up. Well, we used to light that up. Walter Baily, welcome to the show, my friend. Holler at me. How you doing?
Oh man, I'm blessed. I'm so grateful to be here with you, Richard, and Tiffany. I'm honored and excited.
Thank you, my friend. Catch us up a little bit. Obviously, your journey is remarkable. You have one of the those kind of stories that when people, I know thousands read it here in Seattle, in the Seattle Times, but you have one of those transformative stories, a story that really goes from the greatest heights in a man's life to potentially the greatest lows in a man's life. And yet every step of the way, you've remained who you are, and you've continued to make the difference in people's life. That today, just hearing what you're doing, it's inspiring. It's almost as sweet as that dance coming out the tunnel, man. That's what you do to me as an individual when I hear your story. So talk a little bit about growing up in the Portland area, basically, and what kind of an athlete you were, because at 5 years old, this guy is competing against people double his age and not only smoking them, but setting national records or at least area records. Can you unfold that for us a little bit?
Yeah, man. I was born and raised here in Portland. Started doing track and field at the age of probably 5. My brothers and my only sister said, "No, you were running before you were walking."
Right.
Right.
I can believe it.
Yeah. So man, yeah, I started running in. So the biggest difference for me, man, I'm the youngest of 6 siblings. So I had 5 brothers, uh, four older brothers and an older sister. So 5 siblings. So running in after them, and I just never wanted to be left alone. I wanted to go where they went. So they went to the track, and I went to the track. So that's what happened to me as started competing at a young age. The biggest thing that I can say, there was a lot of love growing up from my family. There was a lot of competition growing up,
Okay.
but there was also there was dysfunction growing up because it was a black family that came from love, Christian faith, but there was things that were going on in the house that probably goes on in any African American house in the 70s. I mean, when you're struggling,
Sure.
but we
Right.
did the best that we could with what we had.
So paint a picture for us of that. What was it like growing up with all these siblings? What kind of dysfunction are we talking about? Are we talking about kids sneaking out of school? What are we kind of talking about as far as that all goes?
Well, so for me, I'm going to keep it G-rated, but
Good.
the dysfunction that I can say is having 2 loving parents,
Okay.
them doing the best that they can, but also my mother was a voice of consistence. prowess. She was consistent in her church life. She was consistent in her work life.
It's
My
powerful.
father, on the other hand, um, he wasn't as consistent, and there was
Okay.
times where he didn't have jobs, and mom was holding it down, and dad was doing the best that he could, but he would have these moments as a proud African American male, probably at the age of 40, uh, in the 70s. It was a struggle. It was hard,
Right.
keeping a roof over your kids' heads, and basically whatever went on outside of the house, and it wasn't good, you're going to bring that back to the house.
Hmm.
So what would happen is whatever happened outside, the venting came on and happened to equate with your family, your kids, the
Right.
people that love you. So that's dysfunction. That's the thing that I can say. You know what? Um, it was difficult, but I guarantee you this: there's not a moment that I couldn't say that I wasn't loved. But it was some scary
Powerful.
moments.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this because a lot of people don't realize this, but Portland is a very unique city.
Yeah.
Oregon's a very unique state. Um, the Civil Rights Bill, I think, was passed in 1964 nationwide, but Oregon was the last state in the union to adopt it and really recognize it. Wasn't fully until 1974 that it was really fully recognized in the state of Oregon or in the city of Portland. And so people don't really realize that there's a lot of racial, even though there's not a ton of people of color in Portland, it's a very racially divided city in a lot of ways. Did you experience that growing up? Did that have an impact on you, or were you able to pretty much fit in everywhere that you came because of that dynamic personality, or what was your experience with
I think I was pretty lucky. I
that?
was
Okay.
pretty lucky in the sense of in Portland in general, Portland is kind of similar to Seattle. It's not as big, but we had a lot of diversity in the inner city.
Right.
I was really lucky because of my father and my mother being effective communicators with all people. I did notice in my neighborhood school that my parents had me that was predominantly I would say it was predominantly white, but there was more African Americans in my neighborhood that went there, so it was probably about 30% African Americans. But my parents felt because it was so close to my house, I could get a better education in the suburb. So
Oh, okay.
in the second grade, my parents bused me out to a school called Sacagawea. And what I learned is I started to see what racism was about. That's how I met my best friend. We wound up getting into a fight, and he called me the N word, and we got the squabbing and all of that. But I tell you what, he is still my best friend to this day. So we've been best friends for over 40. I'm 50 years old now, so 42 years.
That's a wild journey.
Wow.
I've heard a lot of stories. I don't know if I've ever heard the N word bringing together people to become best
Right?
friends, but I
That's
will tell you
Yeah,
true.
this: that's an inspiring story, particularly in today's racially charged world, where you
yeah,
jump on Facebook or any
Yeah.
social media source right now, you find people bickering and squabbling, and one got an opinion of race in this direction, the other in that direction, and I guess that's a lot of encouragement right there because
Yeah.
if you can squab it out and then become best friends, that says a lot about not only what we're capable of becoming, but about your character. So,
right.
so
Yeah, and
it's
Rich, what I can
powerful,
also,
man.
yeah, what I also can say too is from an early age, here, here's the caveat of um, a behavioral issue that now I can go back in retrospect. I can trace it all the way back until the second grade, where
Wow.
I was trying to get approval in class from my best friend. He was a good looking white kid that had all the girls, everybody liked him, and I just wanted to be him someday.
Right,
But I would get in trouble because I'm trying to get people to like me. So guess what? I'm acting out, right? And
Yeah.
so I
right.
started to discover um, behavioral issues that followed me all the way through up until I get sober in 2010.
Powerful perspective, man. Being able to
Yeah.
go back in your mental register and kind of date the time that the impress the world came out in you. That's powerful, man. I had a similar story in the sense of Ernie Conwell, who was my roommate at the UW. We grew up together playing junior high and high school football, so not quite the second grade, but very similar experiences where we were both one another's best friends and competed against each other. But there was also that public image aspect where it caused some tension in some ways. So I hear what you're talking about. So was he as good of an athlete as you? What kind of starts developing that way? Because very quickly you start getting some recognition that's off the charts.
Yeah, for me, I was a three-sport athlete. My best friend's name is Matt Ace. Matt was a phenomenal athlete. He was probably in the city. He was one of the best white athletes in the city, right?
Okay.
So for me, he played football, baseball, and basketball, and I played basketball, football, and I ran track, right? So from an early age, we just integrated. What actually tied us together, and this is the coolest thing, it was his birthday is in December, and it's like the 30th of December. So
Okay.
when we became best friends was the same year Star Wars came out, right? So I took over to him, I bought him a gift, and it was Luke Skywalker,
All right.
right? And so every year we had he would invite me to his party, and that was the first time I was able to go spend the night over at somebody else's house that didn't look like me.
Yeah.
And yeah, man. So that's the of integration and understanding diversity at a young age. When we look at the country and the divide and all of these different things, when we look at racism, man, that is something that's learned. And also from people that have learned it, it's a way that people can unlearn it too.
Yeah.
100%, yeah.
It's one of those things. It's a mental disease that you catch, but you can uncatch, right? You can untrain it, you can unthink it, you can unprocess it, and kind of get clear of it. So that's powerful, man. How was that experience going over to a kid that eats different food, probably in some cultural senses, and they look different, they got different ways of acting towards their parents? Do you remember that journey, man? 'Cause that's
Yeah, it was. I'm so glad you said that. The mannerisms were different. So I can tell you this. The beautiful gift was this. Is like his mom. I still call her. She was Mrs. Ace at the time, but she later remarried. But I always called her by either Mrs. Ace or Mrs. Hutchins. And by the time we got to high school, she was like, Walter, you've known me long enough. You can just call me Sharon. And I said, no, Mrs. Mama A. My mother would beat my black behind if I ever called you by your
right.
first name, right? And so it was just one of those things, man. I learned that from my family, the respect aspect, yes sir, no sir. The difference was it always seemed like the food tastes better, right? Because they was eating pizza, and I'm eating hot roast, right?
Right.
But it was unique. The communication of how white people interacted with each other, thoughtful, but how they actually talked about real things that were going on. They didn't hide their feelings of what was going on, and they could share it from the parent to the child, which it wasn't like that from the African American way of life that I had known at a young age. My parents was like, what goes on in this house stays in this house.
Right.
What grown folks' business is grown folks' business. You're a child, so a child stays in this place.
Yeah. And that has a profound effect on the way that you process the world around you, right? The things you're willing to share, your experiences, and how you tell your story. So it's a very guarded way to tell what you're experiencing in life. It seems like we're quick to tell the good, but the things that start ending up being negative in our life end up kind of being pushed back further and further into the corner. And they say don't open up a black man's closet because you're not going to get a skeleton. You might get a graveyard.
Right?
So,
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's something that Richard and I have actually talked about many times. Is just the differences in how we were raised with our families, and we've addressed issues that we have had that we've had to really dive into to understand each other just strictly because of cultural differences.
Right.
And you kind of forget that with, marrying someone of a different race, a different color, that comes with their culture too. And, so it's not just the person, you're marrying a culture as well. And so we really had to learn to understand that about each other. And I tell people all the time, we're all Americans, but there's so many different cultures within America that we really need to learn so we can understand each other better. Because it's simple things that we react very differently to just because of how we're raised, and it impacts how we treat each other.
Yeah, it really does. A big thing when we talk about different cultures, that's for me, on the job training, being able to understand diversity from a young age. So when people as adults and in companies, they talk about diversity training and all of these things. As an African American male, I never needed diversity training because it was always on the job training. Everywhere I went, I had to accept whatever the diverse element that was presented to me, right? Which was pretty much going to be white, right? So for me, I had to be a chameleon. I had to understand. I had to listen. I had to watch, and then I had to explore on how I could be included.
So you had to know how much of your personality to really release, or how much to hold back, how many of your skills to put on display quickly, how many to let trickle out. And I had the unique opportunity to be raised in a multicultural home, and we still had issues. So they're definitely, it's a process. So I hear what you're saying. You had to immediately adapt. Where that's one of the things about white privilege is they don't have to do a whole lot of adapting. And so that makes a unique setup. So here you are, raised competing. I remember you're a superstar. Your senior year, I think you were looking at going actually in 3 different areas of sports. Because didn't you also get basketball recruited in basketball?
I did. It was basketball and track. And if I had it my way, Rich, out of Portland. Portland is a city that loves basketball. So all the people that I grew up with my age, they wanted to play, basketball. So I wanted to play basketball. But people was like, nah, you're better in track and football. So I always wanted to prove to them that I could play just as good as them, right? But I was glad I made the choice to play football.
Yeah. Now you're kind of in your senior year making that decision. We took a road trip down, and I was an okay hooper. I wasn't nothing in your category, but I was an 8th grader, so I moved up to my high school team, who was on a road trip, kind of a tournament deal. And I came down, and the gym is packed out, and it's summertime, and it's hot out, and I think I'm gonna do something against Sweet B. And I get on the defense, and I go to attack him at the rim, and he puts his hand through the rim and smiles at me and says, "All night, baby." I'm gonna back on up and guard somebody else for the rest of the day. I wasn't ready for that show. So when did you decide that you were going to be a Husky? Because with your skill set, you're returning punts and kicks, and you're also a great. Was it a running back or wide receiver?
No, I was a running back, and the UW story, Rich, is really unique because to tell you the power and influence of UW when I was in high school was I got my first letter from Penn University of Penn, Pennsylvania. My second letter, I think my sophomore year, was from Stanford. I got a letter from the University of Washington, but my letter from Washington was hand delivered by 2 white guys in trench coats. It was Jim Heacock and Dick Barrett. And it blew me away because I was like, who are these good-looking white dudes in trench coats coming all the way to deliver a letter to me?
Because that's the only reason they drove down there.
Right. For Richard and Tiffany, it was the experience that Washington was head and shoulders above any university when it came to recruiting. They knew how to recruit. They knew how to recruit.
And here you are. You're one of the best classes to ever come through UW. You're picked with some superstars. You end up there and start playing very, very quickly, right?
Well, actually, Richard, where I found out about you, I didn't qualify. I didn't pass my SAT, so I didn't come in '88. So I had to go to Western Washington University up in Bellingham. So I think I'm still to this day the only person that ever did this. I don't know how they connected me up at Western Washington, but I went to Western Washington. My requirement was I would have to play football. So I played a year of football, and they were NAIA. So I played. It was like to me it was like a glorified high school league. It was fun. I had fun, but they didn't think that I was gonna go to UW. They were like, well, they're not gonna want you anymore. And I had stayed in contact with Dick Baird and everybody there, and so I wound up getting all the credits that I needed, and then I transferred in the next year with the class of 1989. Right.
Such
so
a
Tommy,
unique
the year before
Yeah.
you got here, I came in that class. But I got to see you play I think you were a sophomore with Ernie.
Yeah.
You guys played in the King Bowl.
Right.
So I remember seeing Rich out there doing his thing, going on out there with Kentwood. So I knew you before you knew me.
That's wild, man. Well, I remember you about breaking the backboard on me, so I knew of you. But then you're right, there was that vanishing. Talk a little bit about that in perspective of young people today, please, because there's so many athletes that are out there that they're all their effort, all their attention, all their passion is going into the field. There's cats that are putting in hours and hours and hours in extracurricular workouts where they're doing the footwork drills and the speed work, and some of them are playing multiple sports, some of them are backing off of multiple sports and just working out in their game of choice, but they're failing in the academics because they're not really prioritizing that on the scale of how to get there. Talk about that mental process for you, knowing that you're one of the best athletes in the nation. They hand delivered a letter to you, still pursuing you, and you're missing what could have been, if you didn't get your stuff together, a national championship. You could have missed I think 3 Rose Bowls you end up playing in and playing phenomenal in. Talk about that a little bit, because so many young people miss that element of preparation.
Right. So, this is very crucial. Something that is very, very important is the fact of when you are well-rounded, right? When you're well-rounded with your books, being a scholar athlete, that means you should be giving equal amount of time to your athletic prowess compared to your education. For me, I can say that my academics was not a major concern for me, because it was when I go back and when I look at my behavior, right? Behaviorally, I had these issues to where if I get on the field and I was able to shine, it almost like it would alleviate the other stuff. But at the end of the day, the reality of it is no, you're not taking this other area serious. But guess what? That's the other extracurricular stuff that I was doing, right? Substance use, womanizing, doing all kinds of buffoonery at a young age because of the influence, right? So what my suggestion is for a young person, stay young, stay in the books, and listen to your coaches, listen to your teachers, and listen to your mentors, right? Because it's really important. You don't want to screw up an opportunity to get free schooling and have a way to have a fruitful career and get a major degree from a university.
For me, I grew up in that very similar situation where there's nonsense going on. I participated in some of that nonsense, but I was very, very appreciative and very, very thankful. I had a degree of common sense called my daddy, who would would put the fear of my life into me, right? So
Right.
there was always I would go to a certain extent, a certain point, and then I would recognize, you know what, this is about to go south. I gotta go, and so I was really at the heels twice of being kicked off of my football team. Once you talk about the King Bowl, which was our state championship here in Washington. We
Right.
had at one point 13 players kicked off of our football team for smoking weed the night before or thereabout the King Bowl. So it
Right.
cost us a state championship. Fortunately, I was not with that group. And then there was another group who, previous in the year, ended up through alcohol and drugs, about 17 kids. So we total had about 30 kids in a year that we almost won the state championship, kicked off of our football team because of drugs, alcohol, and just the whole nonsense. What was it for you? Because I've heard that you started fairly young. I know that there were people at the UW where, especially in spring football, I couldn't drink off their same water bottle. I'm not putting anybody on blast, but it happened. It happened a lot at Baltimore when I had an opportunity to play as well, where they've got a special water bottle, meaning you don't know what contraption is in that thing, right?
Right.
And so it started very early. A lot of guys lost in it. So was it because you were so athletic that you could get away with it, and that was the entertainment of it, or was it a sense of brokenness? What was really kind of your source that started that opened that Pandora's box?
For me, I can tell you, I I'm gonna speak in I statements because what happened to Walter was uh, young African American, happy-go-lucky kid that was in the eighth grade, with all this talent, but having behavioral issues. I hadn't even taken a drink or done anything. The first time I ever smoked marijuana, I was with a with a close relative of mine, and they kept forcing it on me. They kept forcing it on me, and then finally I did it, and then I kept doing it, and even when I didn't want to, and I had no idea that was going to turn into a addiction, right?
Right.
So I think I became addicted from the age of 14, and it was basically experimenting. So when I'm playing, sports in high school at a very high level, I mean, basically, I'm still having remnants of substance use that was actually growing. So by the time I was a senior, I was basically in a addictive regimen, right? So smoking weed regularly, drinking, and stuff like that. And what I can tell you is there was a hole inside of my heart that I filled up because what was missing is sincerity of purpose. And when I say sincerity of purpose just meant I continued to do what people wanted me to do. You're a great athlete. You don't have to work. You don't have to do that. You stay engrossed in all these sports. So my mother, my father, and my family, everybody else in my family worked. Having families and working. They were like, no, athletics is your avenue. Um, they didn't know that I started developing this other habit. So once that habit turned habitual, I had no idea that I had this monkey on my back. And so even when I got to college, I can tell you this, I was a part of the crowd that was whatever, we drink and whatever. But I did my other stuff by myself because when I felt lonely, I was experiencing depression, anxiety. I wanted to be left alone. I would hang out with people, Richard, that wasn't even affiliated with the university. So basically, street people were like my best friends because they didn't know me and I didn't know them. So strangers were pretty cool to me, and I felt peace. I felt a sense of comfort in playing, athletics at a high level at the University of Washington. I couldn't let you know. I couldn't let you know. I didn't know that I was. I didn't know that I was going to make money. So I had to put on all these different masks that I continue to wear. The happy-go-lucky guy, right? The person that's gonna show up and have to run after practice, right? So So I'll show you guys. I'm gonna be dancing and skipping while I'm running extra. So being the class clown, I just kind of figured it was easier for me to do that than to really let somebody know, like, hey, I don't know what's going on.
So powerful, man. And as you're developing these two different worlds, basically, where you're highly competitive, highly performance orientated, and you're making enough for it in this realm with showing out and kind of performance issues that way. You've got this whole dark closet world that you're living in. How did you avoid the collision of the two at such a level of D1 athlete? I mean, to be a D1 athlete, it takes a lot of your time. It takes a lot of your effort. Um, did you struggle in school? What was the consequences of trying to keep these two worlds separate? And what did it do in your psyche?
Yeah, well, it was so basically the great analogy is uh, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
Mm-hmm.
right? You figure for 12 hours out of the day, it was going to be at school. So I knew from whatever 2 to 3 hours of sleep that I got from being hungover, once I went to campus, I knew I was going to be here for the rest of the day, right? So it was situational. So I wouldn't do anything about drinking or any other substitute until I got home, right? So everything before that is school, working out and film study and all that, and ever study table. So
Mm-hmm.
it was these two contrasts in two different worlds in these two different people. So at school, you have to go looking, and then at night comes a wolf and she's clothing, right? So it was just one of those things that I felt safe in both of those worlds because I
Oh
didn't
wow.
understand like the rigors. I saw that we were highly competitive in this race. I knew how to tap it. That was easy for me. The athletic part was so easy for me. The hard
Mm-hmm.
part was school, concentrating, and then knowing what is outside of sport. What's outside of sport is what we call life. I
Right.
was scared to death of life because I didn't have really any life skills. I was an athlete, and I could tell you I was wanting to try out for help. Like, hey, something is off. I needed someone to talk to, but I couldn't go to my coach because he's not going to understand. I'm
Mm-hmm.
definitely not going to Coach James because he's going to be like, what is wrong with him? Right? And it just happened to be that perfect storm that nobody would ever understand because I couldn't understand what was going on with me.
Right. So now here you are. I mean, and I say this very respectfully, but probably top. I don't know what your agent or what the scouting report was coming out, but I know for me, I went against you every day. I saw what you were, and I knew what you were. So you're top 10 corners in the country. Let's bump you up to, let's say, the top three. So the expectation is this player from a nationally known football team at a national level has changed, not only changed the course of a game, but has been the difference maker in how we would advance in games and win games. He's going to be a pro. He's going to be a 10-year vet. He's going to be the cat that throws a bank full of money into his personal account. So the expectation is there. What do you as you look back at it? How much of the not having the 10-year NFL career was a result of living these two worlds, and how much of it was just fluke of chance? Because I tell everybody all the time, hey, the NFL is a not for long league, and all that
Right.
matters is that you were not on time to a meeting, you had a sprained ankle on the day you had to run a certain play. I mean, it's so fluke how you make it where a third round cat gets cut and the seventh rounder makes it, and the seventh rounder is actually a worse player than the third rounder. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But just your personal experience, how did that affect you? Not really having a 10-year career, and how did it affect your mindset?
It, well, I can tell you what really happened for me. I was supposed to be a first round pick. Um, Something that happened to me was I was approached going into my senior year about the Lords of London insurance policy. And so I qualified for the match at my position. I think it was 1.25 million. I had no idea what that meant. I had no
Right.
idea. I knew what they were saying is, well, if you pay on this policy, if you get hurt playing during your collegiate um, senior year, this money is guaranteed. So what I was
Take it.
able to do
Yeah.
is I had no consulting from the coaches that would say you can defer that and you still can get the policy. So what
Hmm.
happened to me, I just never signed up for that or whatever. And guess what happened? I get hurt my senior year. I the storm for me, Richard, and Tiffany was this: not making an excuse for what I started to break down when I went back to my career. My senior year, I had just lost my coach. We won the national championship, and then Coach Lay
Hmm.
got a job at Maryland. And so then you bring on a GA, which is John Midas. I love John Midas to death, but I did not respect him at that time because he was like 25 years old. And then all of a sudden, you were somebody that was a GA, and now you're my coach. I
Right.
couldn't look at him, and I did respect him, but I couldn't respect him like I respected Coach Slade. So
Yeah. I mean,
when I
did,
felt I did not perform, I my my addiction um, increased with drinking. I can tell you also my symptoms of mental health, anxiety, um,
hmm
just all just it growth and just became larger than life. It was so bad at times that I didn't even want to go to practice. I was not going to school. I was so worried about the next phase. I wasn't concentrating on the here and now, which was my
Right.
team, right? And then think about it, we still went to the Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah.
Went to the Rose Bowl. But when I didn't get drafted, I got hurt. I played a year of Canadian football, and then after that, the first time I was ever cut, before I got to the Canadian League as a free agent with the Giants, I tested positive for marijuana and alcohol.
Hmm.
So Coach Dan Reeves, I'll never forget it. It was his first year moving over from Denver to the Giants, and he basically was in tears. He said, "Walter, if there was a way I could keep you on this team, you would make the team. But this is
Right.
a business, and because of you being a free agent, you tested positive for marijuana and alcohol. We have to go with somebody that's lesser than you, but somebody that is going to be an asset to this business that's not going to be a liability." And
Someone
Coach
they can
Rick,
have
I
their
think that
confidence
was
in.
part of my life, right? But I understood that. Even when
Hmm.
I didn't understand it, I just knew when he said I was a liability. I could care less about the other stuff. But when he said I was a liability, I understood that because of the marijuana and alcohol that was in my system.
Hmm.
I played a year of Canadian football. I had a blast. I did well on the first American expansion team. Then I get traded to uh, the Edmonton Eskimos, which had just won the Grey Cup. So I'm like, oh man, I'm really going to shine.
It's gonna
But
happen. Yeah.
yeah, the thing that happened was they wanted me to sign another 2-year contract, and I was under my extension. I was like, no, this was a 2-year deal. I'm planning on that exception for my second year. So
Hmm.
they gave me 3 or 4 months. I was with Aaron Pierce in in Secaucus, New Jersey. I was living with him. Um, and then I go back in the spring, back to Portland. I start getting ready. I head up to Edmonton in June. In 2 days, I got cut.
Man.
So I had to make a decision: go back to Portland and keep working out, or what do I want to do? Go back to Seattle and party. So I had those two decisions, and I quit on football. I
Yeah.
wanted to party.
Right.
And that's when my life spiraled out of control. From 1994, my substance use, my mental health, the anxiety became overwhelming. Um, by the time 20 plus years had gone by, I was I was homeless in a crack house.
And this happened in the matter of how long?
So you go from 1994, it just was like a tornado. So in 10 years, you figure I was like well on my way. I had probably moved back to Portland by that
Mm-hmm.
time. I was doing a few different geographics, having a daughter, not being a father, not being able to get a decent job, um, very depressed, and I had no idea. I had no idea I was depressed when I'm in a room by myself all the time, not wanting to be out in the public, not wanting to see people besides if you had something to drink or you had something to smoke on. Um, it was like that sick world, which I call the tar pit. I
Yeah.
was in the tar pit, and I couldn't see my way out. I was in that black hole, that abyss, and it progressively got worse each year, right? But I came back home to Portland to kind of be around my family, but to kind of ask for help. And I kind of went in a roundabout way, but I was so used to manipulation and taking
Yeah.
advantage of women. My thing was, if I find a girl that I can take advantage of and move in with her, and it happened. And it's a part of the sickness. It was a part of my disease, a part of my defect as an addict and alcoholic is uh, I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief, right? And I
Right.
take hostage. And so that's what happened. I took a hostage until that hostage uh, said, you know what, enough. I'm out of here. And once that was the case, I had my second daughter in 2008. The lady moved with my daughter to a state shelter with her parents in Hood River. And what I can say is that's when I became homeless.
Listening to your story, Walter, is just, it's crazy. It's truly an amazing story of this incredible athlete, who rose up and then, you know, drugs and alcohol and mental health issues. I don't think people understand the severity of those and how they dramatically affect your life. And, being in the mental health fields, as you know as well, we like to call it the trifecta. It typically comes in threes. There's an addictions and there's mental health, and, they all just kind of come together, as you said, like the perfect storm. And most people don't even know that they're there. They
Right.
don't even know they're in that eye of that storm, because they're just so not aware of what is happening to them and the outside world around them. They're just so isolated. And so, here you are, your football career is over. You're not having a relationship with your daughter at this point. You're an addict, you're an alcoholic, you're suffering depression. How do you recognize that in yourself, and how do you pick yourself up and say, I need help, and,
Mm-hmm.
and, and take us from that ground zero to how you went from there to where you are now and rebuilding that life?
Yeah. Yeah. So the most amazing thing, I go back to that young white boy at the age of 8. That was my best friend. He was one of my, we that was my partner in crime. He got sober in 2006. So once he got sober, for me, it wasn't that I was lost. I was already lost. But he came back into my life in 2009 because I had made an attempt to change my life. And so what happened was is after kind of rekindling my friendship with my best friend, I went to some meetings, and he knew I was struggling. I just was not ready. So I was in the rooms a little bit. He'd come around, but when I actually use, I go missing from my family, right? I go missing off the face of the earth, so you can't find me, right? My
Right.
phone would go off or whatever. So what happened was April 28th of 2010, uh, a gal left out of treatment, came over to the crack house with another girl, so they both left. So of course I'm like, no money or anything, and I'm like, yeah, come over. whatever. So we party that night, and guess what? All the stuff is gone, and then then the lights come back on from the sun, and then guess what? All these feelings of anger and stress come in. You got two girls that just left a treatment facility, and the changing aspect and element in my life on this day was a gal got on the phone with a sponsor of hers, and she goes, I'm sick of being in treatment. I can't stand 12-step meetings. And you know what? 12 steps doesn't work. Richard and Tiffany, I can tell you this without a shadow of a doubt. I don't know why those words affected me. I started crying, and I said, that's not true. I said, that's not true. I said to this girl, I said, and I'm talking, not talking to the person on the phone, but I'm talking to her. I said, that's not true. I saw it work in you. When you don't come around me or this place, you get housing, you get a car, you get a job, and your life gets better. And she stopped and looked at me, and then she told this other girl, come on, let's go. They left. I started crying more, and I didn't have a cell phone at the time. So uh, some person that was in this house, because it was a bunch of madness and all kinds of people in there. So a person allowed me to use their phone, and I called my best friend. He didn't answer the phone, but I left him a message, and I said, Matt, man, I need you, man. I don't know what's going on, but I need you. So uh, I go back into my depressive state in this crack house, and the person comes to me in 10 minutes and is like, hey, man, somebody's on the phone for you, man, and I don't appreciate you having people call my phone. And I was like, right, brother, give me that phone, right? I said, who is this? And he goes, this is Matt. He goes, Walt, man, I'm so glad you called me. I just want to ask you a couple things. He said, first of all, your parents and your family are worried sick about you. Uh, where are you and what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm not telling you where I'm at, but what I'm doing is, you know what I'm doing. And he goes, okay, I want to ask you two things. Are you willing to do something different in your life? And I go, man, I don't know. And he goes, are you willing to sacrifice anything for sobriety? And I said, you know what? I don't know, but I'm ready to do something that is different than what I'm doing. He said, give me the address, and I'm going to be there in 20 minutes. I gave him the address, and he was there in 20 minutes. And so what I can tell you, the caption is this. Matt pulls up, and he's a very good-looking white dude that's 6'3". He pulls up in his truck, and immediately he pulls up. He gets out, and he has this smile. And the house that I'm in has no light, it has no water, it has no power. But I'm peeling back a window shade, which is made out of a garbage bag, and I see my best friend. Something instantaneously came over me. And I really believe that was God. God came all the way through me and relieved everything from my addiction, from this craving, from the hallucinations and all of that. Man, when I opened that door and I hugged him, he said, "Where's your stuff?" And I just grabbed his arm and I pulled him upstairs and got my 2 bags of garbage bags. And when I closed that door, I never looked back. I did reflect, but I never looked back. He nursed me back to health. He took me to treatment. I stayed sober for a month and a half. And so for me, what I can tell you, I went through the Paul Treatment Center for 6 months. During that time, my father ill because he had prostate cancer, and it was eating him up. So my father and I had a tumultuous relationship. I had a love-hate relationship with my father, but he never gave up on me. And we fought because I would be stealing from my mother, right? And he knew, but he was like, he didn't understand why, right? Like, why would you steal? And all you had to do was ask. And I didn't know that's addiction, right? So on his deathbed, and a half months sober, my best friend came and got me on an emergency pass. I got to go to my dad's bedside here at the house. They're singing, Negro spirituals and different songs and crying. And my dad immediately, he looked over, because Rich, you remember, my dad had these big top bottle glasses.
I
And he was
do.
like, huh? He said, is that Matt? He said, come over here, let me take a look at you. And, the cancer had eaten him up. And my best friend went over first, gave my dad a hug and a kiss and started crying. And he was like, is that Walter? He said, and then he said, give me my glasses. And he put on his glasses. Then I went over there. I didn't cry, but I wanted my father to see me the way he wanted to see me.
Yeah.
And he just said, man, I got my baby back, right? So my father passed away that night, but that was the tacit approval that I needed. My father was a hero of mine. We had a love-hate relationship because of some of the things that he did. But what I learned in treatment is my father did the best he could.
Come on.
He did the best he could for us. So who am I as somebody that's a sinner to be judging somebody else, especially my father? So from that point, what I can tell you is I never knew that I was going to go into behavioral health. I never knew I was going to go into uh, counseling and mental health and all that, but I did. After 2 years of sobriety, I went back to the treatment center. I started working there, became a counselor. A couple years later, I'm where I am now. So I work for Central City Concern, and the program I work for is called the Imani Center. So Imani means faith in Swahili, right? So I work with African Americans in an outpatient setting, getting them into mental health and substance use treatment. And I love what I do. I get to
So
work
powerful.
with people every day that look like me, that experience the trauma and the devastation from a community that really mental health is barely gaining some traction. And so we're one of the first programs that does mental health and substance use together in one building. Right. So I feel really comfortable of what I've been doing as far as my body of work. But I also feel like where I am today, you guys, is I've came to a place that I want to grow more and I want to help more people. And so now that's why I'm going to stay at the Imani Center, but I'm starting my own business so I can help former athletes like me, right?
Yeah.
People that they don't know that they might be going through things. There's one statistic that I want to give you guys. The reason why I wanted to start doing this business is when I found out from the athletes that commit suicide at the highest rate in that culture is African American males.
Yeah.
They kill themselves at an alarming rate, more than any other culture. And it blew my mind because I was like, well, how could that be? But I did the research. That's the data. And so for me, the biggest thing I want to do is not only create awareness, but there's so many people like Walter Baily that get into trouble. And really
Yeah.
what they need somebody that can relate to them, that has been in their shoes, that can let them know, like, hey, I can't stop you from doing these things, but I can let you know you're going down a dead road. But there's some other interventions, and here's another way of looking at life that you can do things differently and still understand that what you're going through, you just need to know that you can be different and unique in your own way. And you still can
Mm-hmm.
be successful.
One thing that's so powerful about what you do, and for our audience out there, being a peer counselor, which is one of the many things that Walter does, the beautiful thing about that is you are getting to talk to somebody just like you. And somebody who has been through experiences similar to you, somebody that you can connect with and say, you know what, this person actually gets me. And I know sometimes, I'm in the mental health field as well, getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling, which is a little bit of a different platform. But, we all want the same thing. We all want to truly help people to change their lives, to be able to live their best life. And, the beautiful thing of what Walter does is he can use his experiences and say, you know what, I get what you're going through because I lived it. And that is one of the reasons why what you're doing is so powerful and your story behind it. And the beautiful thing about peer counselors and specialists, because people can honestly say, wow, like he understands, like he totally gets it, because that's one thing a lot of people don't feel sometimes when they see counselors is they don't understand. And the beautiful thing about peer counselors and what you're doing is you do understand. And you can still live a completely different life and different experiences, but the foundation of what you've learned and what you have felt is the same. And so because of that, you can use that to be able to show people that there is life outside of the dreams that have gone away and the addictions that took you to a very bad place, and completely hitting the bottom of the bottom. I mean, you can't get much further than where you've been, and to be able to rise up and say now to other people, hey, I hit that bottom. I know what that feels like. I know what that does to you emotionally, and I can tell you there's a better way. There is light at the end of that tunnel, and I think that's such a beautiful thing what you're doing. And I definitely encourage any of our listeners, especially if you are in the Portland area, definitely come check out what he does, because he can be an amazing influence in your life, and coach and mentor, because he's lived it and he truly understands the pain and suffering of what that's like.
Well, our other thing too, I wanted to make sure you guys know too. We're collabing with the CHSRB. It's a lab of substance use at the University of Washington. So there's going to be some real big stuff coming out, you guys. So this lab, they have a medical doctor, and they have over 50 PhD specialists that are substance use professionals. So they do all the testing, they do different trainings throughout the NC2A. The University of Washington is the leader of research, right? So Jason Kilmer is somebody that I'll be working closely with, and I tell you what, the blessings of what you guys are doing, what we get to do is network, right? We're allowing people the space not only to pivot, but to know that these outlets exist, right? Just because you don't have substance use issues doesn't mean that somebody else that we can't help you find that's going to suit your needs, from mental health, substance, whatever the case may be. So I'm in the helping business.
Come on. I really want you to define two things, if you could. Yeah. One is I want you to kind of give an overall view of what is good quality mental health. I think that particularly in the Black community, we've done such a task in running away from the topic of mental health, dialoguing about it. We don't even know what is a picture of good mental health, number one. And then number two, I want to just kind of get to a place where we start talking about willful ignorance, wherein how guilty, and before I mess around and cry, how guilty am I that my hero was homeless and I didn't do anything, right? How guilty am I, or people that were closer to you, or people that I'm close to, of willful ignorance, where Coach Reeves comes to you and says, and it's not his fault, he's got a business to run, I get that, he's part of the cog, but NFL coaches or NFL GMs, the Players Association, they see a kid that's in mental disorder, and they don't do anything to fix that disorder because it's not good for the bottom line. I don't do anything about it because it's an inconvenience for me to drive to Portland. Not necessarily that was the situation, but we do have this stigma that causes us, one, not to know what good mental health is, and then two, as a person that's a friend, a brother, let's go to battle. We don't recognize it in our friends and our family members because we don't know, am I stepping on their toes by saying, hey, that's too much is too much? Do I let them come to me? How do I provoke that? So if you can roll that out a little bit for us in those two aspects, I think our audience would really be appreciative, because even if they personally don't have an issue with addiction, there's no doubt that they know someone that's dear to them that they do. And most of us are willfully ignorant about the topic. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be uncomfortable because of it. And it's so necessary for our society to advance and our people to advance. And we say, okay, let's become courageous enough to face what we need to face so we can all grow.
Right. I love it. So, for mental health and me being African American, what I can say is this. My mentor, his name is Andre Pruitt. We talk about mental recalibration, right? So the mind, the body, and the spirit. See, sometimes you just get these two little chinks that might offset the way our structured brain mechanism operates, right? So sometimes it's only a couple things that we might need to reset. But if you don't know that your brain needs to be reset, it's always going to miss. It's going to be mentally uncalibrated. So when I think about mental health, I think about mental calibration. I think about mind, body, and spirit being in tune as one. So everything from your body, from your heart to your head, it's in sync, right? And we have to believe in something, though, right? Sometimes I have to believe in Richard and Tiffany. I mean, I have to believe in you guys because if I don't, me depending on myself, I've already proven it. I will fail.
Right.
Right?
Good.
And so I love it, thinking about how we take care of our mind, our body, and our strength and our spirit. But that mental calibration that we can do every day. How is my mental? Right? How's my body? Right? And how is my internal? Right? What's going on internally? So the stigmas that we live our lives with when people are in fear, they're only in fear because they don't know much more about it. So the more that we keep talking about it, it's going to be the new normal. That's what I get excited about because when I think about mental health and addiction, they're hand in hand, right? So I'm a polysubstance user. That means I'm not addicted to just one thing. I have an addiction to a variety of different things, but they go together and they morph with that mental health component, right? So for me, mental recalibration, mind, body, and spirit, and then that willful, ignorance for me is also the spirit of unknowing. I'll give you guys an analogy or a quote that somebody gave for me is a true definition of success is a person standing atop of his past failure. And so for me, when people don't know anything about it, I was suffering in silence. I couldn't expect Richard to come, to fill me out or to do anything because I didn't know I was going through something. But there is that stigma of like, well, if I go help him, then somebody might see me and I don't want to be whatever. So I don't get upset with people. I think what we do today is understand how can we continue to shed light, but bring education. So everybody has a great story, but a great story is a great story. When you have tangible evidence, which is the data backing it up, that's when people listen. And so that's what we're determined to do because the marginalized population of the cultures today are the ones that have the least amount of data. So that's the thing that we're going to be talking about when we launch with DOS is like the marginalized population. Why are there such barriers from the white supremacy or the white privilege compared to the rest of the culture? Well, because it's been made like that.
Right.
So we don't get mad because the system and the structure is in place. It's how do we infuse into that structure? And that's what we get to do. That holds a lot of depth and weight for me is when people suffer in silence and they don't know much about it, you're just going off the information that you have, right? And sometimes we think that that's ignorance, but what I know professionally is just people are unknowing of what is going on either with themselves or how they help somebody else, right? But with that also, there is that danger of people pointing a finger. See, oh, he's crazy. Oh, well, yeah, don't hang around him because he's messed up or whatever else. And so that's a part of that ignorance too. And so for myself, it's a matter of educating people when I can and understanding with that ignorance just comes the place and an opportunity for people to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important, tremendously important. I definitely want to take a minute to be able to tell people some of the other amazing things that you're doing besides the counseling portion of it, which of course is instrumental in especially the Black communities, as we've talked about. But tell us a little bit about the Dynamic Athlete Solutions, because I know that's something that you have founded that's very near and dear to your heart. And so just why don't you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So dynamic athlete solutions is something I've been wanting to do for probably the last 9 years. A buddy of mine from recovery, he wound up getting this certification, which was a peer recovery mentor, and his name was Danny Dope. Dan Dope passed away probably
Sorry to
two
hear
years after he got this certification. But what Dan said to me, he was a few years older than I was, and it was like, Walter, I see the next business that you're gonna do, and I was like, man, I'm only like a year sober. He was like, no, I just did this training, and man, I'm gonna show you. The next day, he went and had business cards made, and then he had dynamic solutions, and I'm gonna show you these cards. And Danny Joke made these cards, so I don't know if you can see that, but dynamic
Yeah. Raise it just a
solutions,
little bit.
like, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Oh, I might have to move it back. There it is.
There you go.
Okay. So anyway, 2000, he made these cards in 2012. Dan passed away uh, in 2013. And so when Dan passed away, I wound up getting that job at DePaul. Um, he actually had a business plan and portfolio. And so I just got busy with my life, started my, my career in counseling. Um, but 3 years ago, uh, the topic came back up, and then mental health and substance use, and then my story, and it was like, you know what? I I think I can help more people
Yeah.
that are like are like me. And
Hmm.
so I just started talking to some doctors and some mental health professionals, and they were like, "Whoa, who else should do this but you? Because you're the one that you've been working on yourself, and you have the experience." And
Good.
so, I listened to it, and then, 2 years ago, I just started writing, and then I put it on a Word document. So I have
Hmm.
a very large, elaborate uh, plan, which is called Athlete Informed Care, and that's going to be
Okay.
something that hopefully happens later. So I took a piece of Athlete Informed Care and named it Dynamic Athlete Solutions. And Dynamic Athlete Solutions is basically we're going to be creating a educational platform, mental health, substance use,
So
cultural
good.
diversity and inclusion, and suicide ideation,
So
right?
good.
So we're also taking uh, the marginalized population, and we're because I'm African American. Yes, I'm going to say African Americans and uh, collecting data and all that, but this is going to be for all people. So
Hmm.
for former athletes, it can be for the housewife, it can be for the family member that's struggling, that always wanted to be an athlete. So it's not gonna it's gonna be a piece of this is gonna be for everybody, but
So
we're
good.
focusing in on athletes, and then we want to broaden that to anybody that wants to be a part of it. But we're also creating a peer coaching training where we're going to train former athletes to go out and do this work with fostering relationships with either former, current um, athletes, and then people that might be struggling with mental health or substance use issues. Um, the list goes on and on, but it's exciting for me because this is a part of me where I feel like I will be able to help more people. But I
Yeah.
know so many more people that'll be a part of this, that can also help too. So I get really excited, when I look at people like you guys that are doing this kind of work. And this is all about networking.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned with all the people I've networked across the country with. It's an exciting time, especially during the craziness of what we've all been experiencing with
So
this
good.
pandemic and the
Yeah.
racial divide and all these things. I really believe that this type of hard work is going to pay some big dividends and give some people some hope.
I have to say, Walter, I've heard many stories about you from Richard. He's talked about you for years, and you really were his hero. And he's had, I've seen multiple videos of you because he's always has to make sure that he shows me your great plays and stuff. So, I obviously have known of you, and just being able to speak to you and hear your story, it's just incredible. And I'm so honored that you shared it with us and that we get to share it with our listeners because it's a story that people need to hear. And it's a story,
Triumphant.
right, of just truth, raw, just truth, and, of being able to elevate yourself and ultimately still be able to live your best life, even with all the struggles that you have endured. And, being in the mental health field as well, can feel your heart because that's my passion as well. And wanting to truly change people's lives in any way that you can to touch them however you're able to reach as many people as you can reach. So I truly feel your heart just flowing out of you on that because that is so where I'm at too. So I really applaud you in your endeavors to do this, and especially to reach athletes and people, African American communities as well, who definitely could use somebody like you to be able to look up to and say, hey, it's okay to say that maybe I need some help. It's okay to acknowledge that maybe everything's not okay. I know lots of times when you're dealing with mental health issues or addictions, as you did, we live very much a double life, and we very much become very good actors and actresses, and we give people an idea and image of what they want to see. And we don't reveal our heart of what we're suffering because we do that usually alone. And so I think what you're doing is just amazing with continuing to encourage people to say, hey, it's okay to not be okay. That's what I always like to tell people. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you, you know, anything less than victorious, because you have to take that step to be able to start that journey like you did. And so I like I said, I truly feel blessed that we got to speak to you, and it's just an incredible story that I'm thrilled that we get to share. And I will definitely have the link to your dynamic athlete solution in our description so people can check it out. I know, as you said, there's still a little bit of work to be doing on that. It's unfolding and it's developing, and it's going to be an amazing thing. So please, if you're listening, continue to be patient and check it out as it comes to fruition, because I think it's going to be very well worth it.
Well, thank you guys for having me, Richard and Tiffany, and you guys keep doing phenomenal things. And I always love telling people, we don't have to know exactly what our sincerity of purpose, but if you follow your heart and your heart is pure, the sky's the limit. You know,
So true.
that's it.
Powerful. Well, any final thought as far as I love what you just said, but anything that you would want if you were speaking to a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old or somebody on their deathbed, if this was your last moment to impart life to them, what would be your final thought?
This road that is traveled is not promised, but to know that he that endures until the end will have a final destiny, and that destiny will be glorious. And for us, every step counts, no matter how small it is. Every step counts, and it's okay to fail, but get up, right? It's okay to pivot. It's okay to pivot, but it's definitely okay to get up. You don't always have to feel the best and you don't always have to feel okay. But giving people permission that they can be their true, authentic self, right? Allowing them to grow and prosper however they are going to grow and prosper instead of in the mold that I think they should be.
Powerful.
So good.
Can't thank you enough for being on the show. Man, we love you. We appreciate
I
you,
love
respect you. We hope you'll be on again.
Yeah.
And we hope that our audience will really value you.
Most
Thank you for
definitely.
being on today.
I thank
Hey, everybody.
you guys.
Uh, everybody, this is Richard Thomas, and
I'm Tiffany Thomas.
I want to thank you for hanging out with us during the show. You heard some incredible information from one of the most incredible men that's ever walked the planet. As a DB, you learn real quickly, next play up. And if there is something you could take away from this message today, it's that it's okay to fail. It's okay to be at your worst and decide, you know what, that play is over, and I'm going to make a new beginning. And I couldn't be prouder of Walter B. He is the player of all players. He's the athlete of all athletes, but he's the hero of all heroes. And I hope that you will get involved with him down there in Portland. Find out what he's doing in the mental health industry. If you yourself are struggling with addictions or some mental health issues, you're down in the Portland area, please do reach out. There will be resources listed here as far as ways for you to get help. Again, God bless you, and thank you for hanging out here at the Lionheart Institute podcast.